So, this is Source 7 of Economic Growth, Part 2, Section 7 of Common Sense Economics. And the whole idea is here that people are going to be able to enjoy higher incomes and therefore consume more goods and services when they're free to trade with not just other people, but also other people in other countries. Trading with people from other countries makes us wealthier, not poorer. Okay? So let's get into this. The whole idea of free markets is that we're able to trade with one another, right? Because we know that when we trade, we're creating wealth, right? Because I trade an item for your item, and you're giving me your item because you like my item more, and I'm giving you my item because I like your item more. So the idea is that we're both ending up better off. Okay, that is the general idea behind trade. Right? We have these two cavemen here. Yeah. So, I wish I had that rock. Or, I wish I had stick. And they trade with each other, and then they do have rock. They do have stick. Yeah, they both end up better off. They like what they end up with more than what they had before, right? That's why they would trade, right? And we both end up better off, okay? So think about the United States. The United States, are we more, trading, or are we all interdependent? Okay, and think what would be better for yourself to do, right? There's a reason why the family in Little House on the Prairie was in a little house on a prairie all alone with nothing but their family, right? And that's because they did everything on their own, right? If you wanted pants, you had to make your own pants. If you wanted food, you had to grow and make your own food, right? Whereas today, for us, a lot of the things that we consume, most of what we consume, we don't make, right? They didn't get to specialize. Today, we get to specialize, right? We get to specialize in doing one thing, and then we can buy everything else that we need from other people that are specializing in that one thing as well. Whereas in the Little House on the Prairie, everyone had to do everything, right? Or this family had to do everything, okay? And I like comparing countries to this, whether or not you want to be a country that's like the Little House on the Prairie, or if you want to be a country that's closer to what's happening in the left here, where you have individuals trading and then being able to specializing and being able to trade for what they need and what they can't produce, right? And this is what you see people doing all the time in video games. Like they'll go... They'll do one thing in the video game, they'll get gold, and then they'll be able to buy whatever the other players are doing, because the other players are specializing in those things, right? Whereas if you try to do everything in the Little House on the Prairie, it takes so much longer to produce. Yeah, I talk about this all the time. I bring up the Daisy Dukes. Yeah, I could try to make my own pair of blue jeans, but I could try all week and I wouldn't even have a pair of Daisy Dukes. But if I go to work for a day, I'd have enough money to buy a pair of blue jeans, right? So we got to think. Is America self-sufficient or independent? Sloth is right. The United States, we are a giant trader. We are not self-sufficient. And it's an American idea, to be, pull yourself by your bootstraps and make a world for yourself, be self-sufficient. But the truth is, we're not dependent, right? We're not dependent, we are interdependent, right? We are interacting with the world, and we are using the world around us in order to leverage ourselves to a better place, okay? Because if we were dependent on the world, then we wouldn't do this. But it's because we work together with the world that we are able to increase our living standards, right? Because we're trading with others, right? It's not a good thing to be self-sufficient. That is a huge waste of resources to do everything on your own, okay? And I'm not too sure about Iceland Sloth. I know that a lot of countries, all countries, if they are successful, if they are proficient and they are productive and they have high quality of living, it's because they trade. It's because they specialize and then buy whatever they don't produce, which enables them to have such a higher quality of life, because you're able to produce more when you specialize. Yeah. Adam Smith noted this when he was looking at a bunch of people that make little pins, the little pins that you stick into something, right? And they have the little maybe rubber or plastic tip. And he noticed that workers, if they were doing every single task on their own, if they were all being self-sufficient making pins, they would make 20 each day on their own. However, if they were specializing, they could make 48,000 pins each day. Okay, 48,000 pins per day when everyone was specializing, right? That is the power of specialization. By having people perform their own tasks and take care of what they need to take of, they are able to produce more. And the same is true for everything when it involves production. Okay, guys, think about the United States. Everyone specializes, right? Indiana, we specialize in corn. Idaho specializes in potatoes. Texas specializes in beef. For a while, Michigan would specialize in cars. California specializes in movies. And then Florida specializes in just super whack news stories, okay? So everyone specializes, okay? In the same way, you could see this too if you wanted to look at the exports of certain countries. You could see what they specialize in as a country, and I'm sure you could look at different areas in each country, different towns, different cities, and you can see what those cities specialize in. You see, when we specialize and produce according to our opportunity costs, we're taking part in, if you remember, what is called a comparative advantage. This is a country's ability to produce a given product relatively more efficiently than another country. That is, producing it at the lowest opportunity cost, right? We talked about this already, but you don't want to produce according to your absolute advantage. You want to produce according to your comparative advantage, right? Not what you are just the best at, but what you have the lowest opportunity cost in doing. Because when you specialize and you do whatever you have lowest opportunity cost in doing, if you produce that item, you can produce it until you have all that you need and keep on producing it as you trade it to others that need it, and they'll be willing to pay you a pretty penny for it, for which you can use that to go and get whatever else that you may need, okay? Again, this whole idea of comparative advantage was, long studied by David Ricardo, over a couple hundred years ago? In any case, if you remember, in class, we talked about this example of Stormwind and Ironforge and how they can make swords or maces. And we came to the conclusion that they can make, I think it was swords and axes in class, sorry, I apologize. But we came to the conclusion that Stormwind should be making the... Hold on. Doing the quick math in my head. That Stormwind should be making the swords, and that Ironforge should be making the maces, right? So Stormwind should make all swords, and Ironforge should make all maces, and then by trading with one another, they can actually produce more swords and maces than if they would produce them all on their own, right? Even though Ironforge can make more swords and make more maces, if they specialize and Ironforge makes all maces and Stormwind makes all swords, then they would have more swords and maces between the both of them if they specialize, okay? If you would like to watch a video going over comparative advantage again, you can. However, I'm not focused too much on the math of comparative advantage, so we're going to go ahead and skip this and continue talking about free trade, okay? So think of all the countries that U.S. trades with the most. There's one country that I know you know. I'm going to wait for it to pop up in chat here. And I'm getting closer and closer and closer. There it is. Good old China. Okay? Yeah. And that's because differences matter, right? Our economy and China's economy is a lot different. And they're becoming more westernized as of recently, in the last 40 years or so, as far as industrializing their economy and allowing more companies to come in from the outside. But if you look at how, how their population fills into the land that they have, it's a lot different than here in the United States, okay? So the differences between each country and the natural resources they have, if we go back and look at this map, based on where you are, it could be that certain crops grow better in certain areas. Certain locations and where, based on where the country is, may lead you to be able to produce an item and ship it to the people that need the most, right? So it is the difference in each of these areas and the people in these areas that lead us to have all of these different comparative advantages, okay? They lead us to not be dependent on one another, but interdependent with one another, right? Where we are intertwined, our lives are, okay? And because of this, we get to benefit from trade because of our comparative advantage. I've already said, countries, they have different natural resources, they have different locations. Crops may better grow in one area than another. They may have technology that's more developed in one area than another. All of these are reasons why comparative advantage leads us to benefit from trade, okay? Because it truly, if we were all the same, trade wouldn't benefit anybody, right? If we were all the same, then I would have no benefit of trading with you, right? But it's because of the different locations, the different natural resources, the different capital and human resources and technology that we are able to gain from trade. Okay, so when we're thinking about those that are different, right? When we're thinking about those that are different, those that we gain from trade with, we really should work together with it, be interdependent with those that are different, because we can stand to gain a lot from them. Okay, so this is the big argument then, right? Should we be free trade or should we be protectionist? Okay, this is the big argument that's posed. You have free trade being the argument that anyone should be able to import and export anything to and from anybody. If I want to buy something from China, I should be able to without any sort of tariff. And if I want to buy something from a country that we buy a lot of stuff and they don't buy anything from us, should I be able to do that? What if the other foreign country is putting a tariff on our goods? Should I still be able to buy goods from them? That's the argument for free trade, that you should be able to do all those things. And then there's protectionism. And protectionism is the idea that it's in the best interest of the country to restrict trade. And we're going to go over their arguments here in a second. But what I want you to notice here is that the free trade argument benefits consumers, or everybody, and protectionism benefits producers, or just the people that make the thing, that have a protectionist restriction against the against the items coming from overseas. So a lot of times you'll see this with auto workers, you'll see this with steel workers, and the idea here is that the reason why people buy from overseas is because it's either a cheaper product or a better product, and the people that are here in America producing that item, they can't compete or don't want to compete with the foreign competition. Okay, so what this ends up leading to is groups like those in the bottom right that will campaign to have politicians put restrictions on foreign competition. And of course, their argument is that it leads to more jobs, but as we know, it's not all about jobs. And the truth is, all we're doing is really moving jobs, and as we'll learn today, preventing jobs from existing. Okay, so let's look at the free trade arguments. The idea here is that when we are trading with other countries, we are utilizing specialization, that whole idea of comparative advantage, and we're more efficient. Okay, and then whenever we're buying goods from foreign countries, the markets for those goods and services, they expand, which then leads to more specialization, right? And this specialization will lead to more efficiency, and then there's more production of these goods and services, right? And this leads overall to there being more goods and services available, right? So if we buy something from overseas, we now have more of those products here in the United States, and as we have more of these products here in the United States, this will lead us to specialize in the sale and the production of these goods, leading to more efficiency. It's kind of a self-repeating cycle. Okay, so we have more and more goods and services when we're able to trade with those overseas. Okay, the other idea is that we have more competition. If there's a firm that has high prices here in the States, then and maybe there's no other individual or any other company that can compete with them here in the United States, well, there's bound to be one company that compete with them on the world stage, right? And they'll be able to compete with them and be able to come into the U.S. market and encourage some competition, encourage them to cut costs and cut price, and then be able to maybe increase the quality of their product and so on. Okay, so I really like this comic here. You have this guy standing saying, only traders buy foreign cars. And then this guy asks, where'd you get the sign? He says, Japan. I buy all my quality stuff from there. I'm assuming he's upset because people are buying Japanese cars. And then you have these two monuments competing with one another. And this is what I like to think of, items coming from overseas, right? They compete based on price. Yeah. So if we have a cheaper product coming from overseas, we're going to have to compete by lowering. If I'm a firm supplying something here in the United States, I'm going to have to compete by lowering my price below what the person coming from overseas is producing it at. And then there's the protectionist arguments. Their argument is that we are protecting U.S. jobs from foreign labor because the foreign labor is so much cheaper. Well, here's the idea. Think about why it's cheaper. Okay, it's because they don't require as much as the United States labor requires, right? And is it all about price? Or is it also about quality, right? Because if you're getting replaced by someone that's working for cheaper, can they still do what you're doing? If they can, then why is it that you deserve the job more than they deserve the job? Okay, the worst player in the MLB is paid $500,000, right? And I'm willing to do it for $50,000. So why don't they just give me the job? Because the truth is, it's not just about the price of the labor. Okay, it's not about the price of the labor. It's also about whether or not that labor is the same. I would not be the same playing in the MLB as an actual MLB player, right? In the same way that that foreign laborer has to be able to do the very same job, to be as productive as the U.S. worker. It's just that they're willing to do it for cheaper. Okay. So one of the arguments they have as well is that the idea is here is that it protects jobs from cheap labor. This implies then that it takes away jobs. This kills jobs in the United States. Okay, and their argument for why we should have tariffs on foreign goods so that we have to buy the United States goods is that it will increase the employment in whatever industry we're putting a tariff on the imported item. So is it true that you may have increases in employment? I mean, yeah, we talked about that, right? We looked at the tariffs on steel and how that led to there being a higher employment in the steel industry here in the United States as more steel was being bought from domestic producers. However, we don't see the jobs that are lost. Or matter of fact, sometimes we even do see the jobs, right? We talked about all the jobs that were lost at auto manufacturers, people that bought steel because steel was more expensive. Another example would be maybe household appliances. There were some jobs that were lost there because, again, metal was more expensive. Anything that then used steel in the production of it, it maybe had to end up laying off people because they couldn't produce as much as they could before and therefore had to lay off folks. You also don't see the jobs that would have existed without the protectionism. As we grow as an economy and utilize comparative advantage, again, we're able to specialize more as we have a higher consumption of that good, and we will see that we have more jobs that are being created. And when protectionism occurs, we don't see the jobs that would have created. And because we don't see them, because we can't see into the future and see those jobs that would have been created, we don't get upset when we don't get upset when we see those jobs being lost because they never existed in the first place. Whereas when someone loses their job to cheaper overseas labor, we do see that. That is more visible. Yeah. But is the job that we lost because we had not gained it yet, is that somehow not as bad just because we haven't seen it created yet? Oh no, they're both jobs, right? And matter of fact, the one is actually something that's more productive than the one that we are protecting. They argue that it's impossible to compete with cheap labor, yet the law of comparative advantage says otherwise. See, the thing is, it's possible to compete. It's just that they can do it for cheaper, right? And what that should tell you is that you should not waste your time producing something that you have a higher opportunity cost in doing. Okay? Instead, the American should take their resources and devote themselves to producing something else which they have a lower opportunity cost in doing. Okay? And of course, there's the argument that trade lowers wages and standard of living. And the thing is, that's true for the people that would have their jobs disappear because of free trade. But they are the only ones that end up being, losers. And even in that, it's for the short time that they're unemployed. Okay? Because the truth is, everybody else is better off, right? Only the people in the steel industry were made better off because of steel tariffs. Literally everybody else in the country and every other industry was made worse off because of the tariffs. So, the biggest one then is that it creates jobs. But the truth is, in the protected industries, sure, but overall, it's false, right? We've also seen this with the protectionism of the sugar industry, right? Where they have sugar quotas. We can't import over a certain amount of sugar. So in the sugar industry, maybe there's more jobs. Overall, though, we've actually seen some companies that make sugary foods leave the United States because it's more costly to buy sugar here. And just one reason why we can see that this is demonstrably false is that if you look at from 1980 to 2005, you're able to see that imports have increased by 477%. We are importing more than we ever have, and jobs actually increased by 47% as well, right? So just because we had a whole bunch of increase in the imports, that didn't lead to us having less jobs. Matter of fact, we have more jobs today than we had in the past. So there's sometimes this argument that we need to be self-reliant, and this is one reason why some of the steel companies call for steel tariffs. They call this the strategic production interdependence. Sorry, back up. They call this strategic self-reliance. Anyways, I want to get to this strategic interdependence here in a second. But they think that we need to be able to be the only ones that can make it. And because of that, if we're relying on China to make our steel and then we go to war with someone that China is allied with, then China can just shut down our war production because we won't have access to steel. And there's other ways of getting past this. We can stockpile steel. Steel is actually relatively durable in that you can just store it in a warehouse and it's fine. We've also seen this argument with personal protective equipment. Again, a lot of that stuff you can just store in a warehouse and it would be just fine. So we could have massive storage centers, and the people that store it would be highly rewarded, when the next pandemic rolls around and they can sell it for way more than they bought it. Furthermore, we have this idea of strategic production interdependence where we can diversify our production and reduce the reliance on trading with any specific partner, right? Instead of just trading with China, we can trade with a bunch of other low-cost producers, and that will reduce our reliance on any one given country. So if one country stops trading with us, we still have steel coming from the other countries, okay? So this opinion is kind of something that people try to come up with to be quick on their feet, but in reality, it's just not realistic. There's plenty of ways for us to get away being reliant on one country entirely, and for the most part, stockpiling will take care of it. And if we don't want to stockpile, then we can do this whole strategic production interdependence idea where we diversify how many people we're buying from. So, why do we still protect industries, right? Because here's this great quote by Henry George. He was an economist from about 100 years ago. And he said that what protection teaches us to do to ourselves in times of peace is what we do to our enemies in times of war. Let's think about that. Let's think about that. What protection teaches us to do to ourselves in times of peace is what enemies do to us in times of war. So protection is telling us that we need to trade less, right? Because we need to trade less because it makes us worse off. We have less jobs, less production. Our quality of life goes down when we're trading. But what is he saying what enemies do to us in times of war? What's he saying here? What is he saying? Well, what do your enemies do to you in a time of war? What did the North do to the South? What did Britain try to do to us? What do we do whenever we try to punish a country for doing something bad? We put sanctions on them. We make it so they cannot trade. The North to the South put up a huge blockade around all of the South so that no products could get into the South. What we do in times of war is make it so that our enemies cannot trade. We make it so that they are only relying on themselves. And that hampers their economy, their ability to produce, and that hampers their ability to be a formidable opponent as they have no production. So really what protection is telling us to do is to literally put a blockade around ourselves, right? If every protectionist had their dreams met, they would be doing exactly to ourselves what a foreign country would do if they were at war with us, and that is blockading us and not letting us trade. Okay, so do protectionists really have our best interest, written on their heart? Probably not, okay? What's up, Darth? So if trade barriers hurt the economy, why do they exist then? A lot of it is politics, okay? And we'll introduce how politics kind of enters into the limelight here as kind of the main cause in what we'll focus on part 3 of this book. Because politics enables people that really, really care about something people that really, really care about keeping their steel mill job, people that really, really care about keeping their auto worker job, they'll be willing to vote to put protectionist tariffs and quotas on our imports. Okay, so they care a lot about it, so they're willing to vote about it. Okay, and the people that don't care a lot about it, I mean, they don't care about it, so they don't care to vote against it, right? And then we have the lack of seeing the unseen. Again, these next two kind of go together, right? Losing jobs is highly emotional. That's highly visible, right? We see people lose their jobs, right? When we hear a factory shuts down and we hear about all those people that are losing their jobs, that sucks, right? Because, dude, I'm not about to tell you that losing your job isn't a horrible thing. It is the worst, and it wrecks your expectations for the future. It totally disrupts a family. It's hard, right? It's hard. So when you see people losing their jobs, I mean, that's highly, highly visible. But again, we don't see the unseen. Yeah. We don't see what jobs aren't getting to exist because we're not allowing ourselves to specialize and have these better, more productive jobs. Okay? We don't want to, because we don't see what jobs are being lost that aren't able to exist yet. That's one reason why people don't care too much to vote against these, because they don't see the unseen. Okay? We'll talk about that after, Darth. So enter into public choice theory. There's this, the whole idea behind public choice theory as a school of economics is that when you have things that are political, you have a group that has benefits that directly benefit them. And then you have everybody else in the country on whom these costs are indirectly afflicted, right? And the way that I like to explain this to my students is with this example. Let's say that I had a rule that all my students every semester had to pay me $1. Okay, every semester, every student has to pay me $1. Okay, it has to be, just turned in with your syllabus. Okay, you guys could do something about it, but it's $1 for the whole semester, right? So you could go to the principal, I could go to the principal, and I would have a much higher incentive to go to the principal and defend my position than you would have to go to the principal and offend my position, right? Because think about it, it's $1 over the course of a whole semester, right? To you, it's a single buck. Who cares, right? I certainly wouldn't. But think about me, right? I have about 100 students every semester. That's $100. Do you think I care to go and plead my case to the principal? Absolutely, right? I may even hire a lawyer, pay him $50, come in, have them, write the principal an email. That way I can just get, $50 and then net. Whew, pretty cool, right? So you can see that there's a big difference in the weight of how much these two parties care. And you can see how when it comes to things like tariffs, those that benefit from tariffs is a small group of people that care a whole lot, and they can be organized in order to push for votes. However, the costs, the people that it's costing, they may not even be aware, right? The general population is not aware that they pay, I think it's 10 to 20 extra dollars a year for sugar, products that contain sugar because of the sugar quotas here in the United States, okay? They don't know because it's such a small cost when you divide it up over a year that they don't care. But the sugar manufacturers, they get a lot more money, and they're willing to lobby Congress and spend money and spend other resources in order to lobby the government in order to get these sugar quotas to stay in place. In order to, the steel manufacturers, they make a lot more money when there's tariffs on foreign steel. So they're willing to put a lot of resources into ensuring that those tariffs stay up. And everyone else may not be aware of it. Okay? And because you're not aware of what it's costing you and what it's costing us and the future jobs, the more specialized jobs that it's costing us, you're not aware of those jobs that could exist. So when you hear that, hey, it creates jobs, that's why people are so easy to jump on the bandwagon, because they don't see the invisible, right? They're not thinking as if they were an economist, okay? So again, we have a few producers, and they get huge direct benefits, right? Me, I'm the only, in this case, I'm the only producer of this law that would give me $1 per student. So I get huge benefits. But you guys, the consumers in this case, you'd all be giving me only $1. It's a small cost, yeah? So you don't really care that much, right? So you have to think, who's willing to spend money to gain these benefits or avoid the cost? Well, it's going to be, the people that are gaining, right? So in this case, politicians can actually gain support by adopting these trade barriers. This is why you see politicians oftentimes parading these, is because you see it on both sides of the political aisle, by the way. It's not just Republicans or Democrats. It's not just conservatives or liberals. Politicians on both sides can gain by adopting these trade barriers, because those that trade barriers hurt, while it is everybody, it's such a small cost for everybody, but those small costs pool up into being huge benefits for the individuals and the few that are benefited. Yeah. So politicians can actually gain support by adopting these ideas, as well as some other ideas that we'll talk about in part 3 of the book. Okay, so there's all sorts of different trade restrictions, things that are used cleverly to prevent us from trading with our friends overseas. The first of which is tariffs, right? We can just put a tax on something. It makes it more expensive, and if it's more expensive, we're going to buy the now relatively cheaper domestic stuff. And you can also think that each of these has winners and losers, right? So the winners, of course, are people that are producers, and the government gets money. Producers get to be able to have their product be the one that's sold off the shelves, because none of the consumers want to buy the more expensive product. The consumers may not know that the only reason it's more expensive is because of the government tariff. If there weren't the government tariff, the foreign product could actually be cheaper. And of course, it's also the case that those consumers, they're losing out because, well, they could be saving money, but now because of the tariff, no, they're having to pay more for a product. Okay, so you also have to think, who has more political power then? Is it the consumers or the producers? Well, if the government wins when the producers win, it's kind of obvious, right? The consumers really don't have much of a chance. Yeah. Same thing with sugar quotas, right? We're placing a limit on the product that can be imported. In this case, it really is the producers. I don't have government up here. It's more, you could say politicians are also winners, because the sugar producers, in this case, or anything that has a quota on it, may be willing to have the people that work for them in their industry to campaign for this politician, or maybe endorse that politician. Like, oh, this president has been great to sugar and having the sugar quotas. You guys should all go vote for them, and so on. And of course, the losers again are the consumers, because they're going to end up paying more for sugar than they otherwise would. There's also consumers, not just of sugar, but also the suppliers of sugar, right? As we read in the other chapter about those sugar quotas, there have been companies like Oreo and I think Millhouse Cookies that have actually, not Millhouse Cookies, it was some cookie company that have actually left the United States because sugar now costs more in the U.S. So it's also people that are unemployed are also turning out to be losers. Yeah, that's exactly what I was saying, Darth. Yep, you got it, man. I got to it just as you were typing it out, it seems. So why are consumers losers of trade barriers? Well, it's not that there's just less goods to consume, right? I mean, if we have quotas, it's literally limiting how many goods can come in from overseas. It's also causing there to be higher prices, right? We know that when goods become relatively more scarce, there are higher prices of those goods, right? I have a picture up here, the Anaconda Plan that General Scott used to starve the South during the Civil War in order to essentially defeat the South, right? We put up a huge blockade of around the South, as well as cutting them off from river routes and goods coming over land. We did our best, or the Union did their best to ensure that the South could not trade with anybody. And this hurt consumers, because we know that the quality of life of a population becomes better when there are more goods and services available to meet the needs and wants of more people in that economy. Okay, so when we stop trading, we're making it so that there's less of those goods and services available for people to consume. Okay, and in a similar sense, even if it's just one item, it's still the consumers of that item that are now not able to consume that item, as well as other items, because hey, maybe they're still buying that item and they're spending more for it, right? So it makes us pay more for the items we consume, and it also makes it so that we cannot have as many of the items that we consume. So another type of trade restrictions are embargoes. This is just a straight up ban on trade. Embargoes are literally a blockade that you put on your own country, right? A blockade is what we put around a country that we're at war with to prevent them from getting supplies from other countries are buying things from other countries. A embargo is literally when our own government says you are not allowed to trade with those people, right? We have this with Cuba. You are not allowed to trade with Cuba. What? We literally put an embargo on ourselves, a blockade around ourselves when it comes to trading with Cuba, right? Again, this hurt consumers that wanted to buy things from Cuba, okay? Even if we see a lot of the times tariffs and quotas, even if another country is putting an embargo on us or a tariff on us or any other trade restriction on us, right? Like let's saying that, you know, China puts a tariff on goods coming into their country that we sell them, even if the Chinese government is making it so that Chinese consumers overseas have to pay more for our products, meaning that we may not be able to export as many products of them anymore. Why would we just turn around and make it so our consumers also have to pay more, right? If a country puts an embargo on us and makes it so that the people in their country cannot buy our goods, why would we turn around and make it so that we can't get their goods, right? Because we know getting their goods and services is actually what's going to increase our quality of life, right? There's also some non-tariff barriers. These can be fun. We call these NTBs. There's actually, I think this may not be current, but for a time, and maybe even currently, in Russia, you couldn't buy American chicken because they called it dirty American chicken. In reality, what this is just a ploy for protectionism in Russia so that the chicken producers can be protected from the American producers of chicken who are able to make it at a very low cost. But they say, instead of, you know, saying that, oh, we need to save Russian Russian chicken producer jobs, the Russian government says that it's the American chicken is dirty and you don't want it. Interesting. I can't remember why I had that meme up there. I want to say there's something where... Oh, I can't remember why I had that meme up there. I'm sorry for those of you that wanted to know why I have Free Shavakadu up there. I apologize. There's also some historical trade barriers, as we've seen. I'm assuming that UN sanctions are probably more of an embargo, but I suppose they could fall under this. But historical trade barriers, there's always been trade barriers throughout history, right? There's always been countries that have denying their citizens the ability to trade with other countries. However, one of these is talked about in Common Sense Economics a whole lot, and that is the Smoot-Hawley tariff. The idea with the Smoot-Hawley tariff is that the economy wasn't doing so hot in the year 1930, and well, we wanted to be able to shock it back to life. So their idea was we don't have enough things being made here in the States, and it's because we're importing all of these things from other countries. So we're going to put a tariff, an astronomically large tariff. I think it was like something like 70% on some goods, on goods coming from other countries, and man, the results were not too fun. This is one of the things that made the Great Depression so bad. The idea was that they wanted to shock the economy back to life by encouraging us to produce things on our own, but we know that the things that we import from other countries, we do so because it costs us more to produce them here. So all we ended up doing was increasing how much it cost, and we reduced the quality of life and the overall wealth of individuals with this tariff. I mean, matter of fact, before the tariffs, unemployment was about 8%. I mean, that's bad. That's not a good unemployment rate. But at least we were able to economize and use the cheaper foreign goods. But after they put these tariffs into place, unemployment spiked to, you know, the historic number of, you know, nearing 25%, like it was in the Great Depression, right? Because this is that time period, right? For those of you that aren't familiar with the Great Depression occurring in the 30s. And of course, this meant that we weren't able to use the cheaper American goods, right? This is a great example of what happens when you prevent trade, right? And how trade leads to there being more jobs, right? In this case, we just straight up almost entirely prevented trade with super high tariffs, which led to super high unemployment, right? Because a lot of these companies that were sourcing their materials from other countries, they straight up couldn't produce and they had to shut down. And also consumers were hurt by this as they were buying things from overseas and they couldn't afford to buy those items anymore because they had to buy the more expensive domestic counterpart. And of course, this is happening at a time, unemployment's going up, so people are losing their jobs, and they have to pay more for the goods they consume. Yikes. It's actually over 1,000 economists had written to, what can I think of your name? President Hoover. It's on the screen here. I'm so silly. Over 1,000 economists wrote to Hoover asking him to veto the bill, and he didn't. And, well, the results, they were disastrous. Unemployment spiked, and we weren't able to enjoy the cheap foreign goods anymore, right? But hey, at least we were making it here in America. Oh, well, a whole bunch of people are unemployed, but we did it. Yippee. Oh, brother. Some other things that may affect trade. There may be other countries that are exporting their goods and they have a subsidy, right? People did accuse the Japanese producers of doing this. It was either cars or steel or maybe neither. But let's just say, as an example, Japan was producing steel, and their government, the Japanese government, was giving those steel producers money in order to be able to produce. So then, because they're getting a subsidy, they can produce it at a much lower cost than the companies here in the United States. So the Japanese are able to export it here to the States and sell it at a much lower price than the domestic producers. And then, the domestic producers are going to say, this is unfair. They're getting a subsidy from the Japanese government. We need to have an American subsidy for our American steel plants. That way we can compete with them. Well, hold on. Let's think here. What's really happening? The Japanese government is giving money to produce steel that they're sending to us. And of course, the Japanese government gets that money from Japanese citizens. So Japanese citizens are paying the Japanese companies to make steel cheaper and send it to another country so the citizens in that other country can get that product for cheaper. Why should we deny this? It might as well be welfare coming from another country, right? We're not paying any more for steel. Matter of fact, we're paying less for steel just so people in Japan can have jobs. I'm fine paying less for steel if the Japanese citizens want to pay for it. Okay. There's also this idea of dumping, that selling a product at a low cost. This would be like China coming over and selling something at a super cheap rate here. But the thing is, the market rate here in the States is based on the companies that can produce it here, right? So if a producer from another country finds out that they can sell it cheaper here than the producers here sell it, then of course they should sell it here, right? And that's competition on a foreign scale. You saw there was a great story with shrimp, and there were a bunch of American shrimp companies complaining that there were Asian shrimp companies that were selling shrimp for much lower and dumping it. But that just because they're able to produce it at a cheaper rate, just because they're a better producer, it doesn't necessarily mean that we should do anything about that. If anything, the people that are American shrimp producers, if they can't keep up, then they should probably stop shrimping and start looking for something else to do. And I would say so, Darth. Yeah, I would say that anything like a grant, it goes to a domestic firm that then has worldwide sales. That could count as trade subsidies for sure. Yeah. But why does this all matter, right? Why does it matter that we're able to trade with other countries? Why does it matter that we should have property rights, that we should enforce contracts evil-handedly? Why does it matter that we should have monetary stability? Because again, that's what we've been talking all throughout part 2 of Common Sense Economics, right? Why does all this stuff matter? Well, again, it all comes back to growth, growing the economy. And if you look at GDP per capita among this list here, okay, I want you to notice that the countries that have had the most growth in GDP per capita have been the countries in which they've had a high economic freedom of the world index rating. In order to get a high rating, you have to have all of the things that we've had a conversation about in this second part of the book. So, the countries with these high ratings, they have seen very, very high rates of growth. So, folks, if you want to have economic growth, you'll want to have, and I'm going to read them again straight from the horse's mouth. I don't want to read them here on the screen. I want to read the actual titles that are in the book. If you want to have a high economic freedom of the world index, You're going to want to have a legal system that protects property rights and enforces contracts even-handedly. You're going to want competitive markets. You're going to want limitations on government regulation. You're going to want an efficient capital market and monetary stability, low tax rates, and free trade. Those are the 7 sections that we talked about during this chapter, guys. Again, all the things that we've talked about are things that you need to have if you want to have a high economic freedom of the world index rating. And high ratings are highly correlated with higher growth rates when it comes to GDP per capita. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.